Hello, everyone. It's Wednesday. It's a Wednesday that Ricky is here, and we're so excited. Ricky, so okay, first of all, what's up with your square jacket?
It's Square Six. Square Six. And Square Six is the name of the development shop that's helping me build Leela. Um, and they're in Arkansas, and they invited me to Arkansas for a celebration, and they gave us all jackets. We got swag. We got nice swag because you get a North Face jacket. It's like, they spend a pretty penny of the money that I'm paying them on it. So it was good.
That's awesome. Well, it makes me
Yeah.
think in a chart, like if you have six squares, you could be like, and square six, is my son Mars square or whatever. Have you ever seen
I
a chart
might have
of squares?
I might have six. I'm gonna have to count. I'm gonna have to count later. That'd be ironic if I had exactly six squares in my chart.
Yeah, and then when you exploded the chart onto different wheels, like you're gonna do in your app, you could have this square six on the sixth wheel.
So if I exploded the chart and the aspects, would there be six separate charts for the total so one for each of the squares?
One for each aspect. Have you ever
Right.
seen an exploded axon in architecture?
I haven't.
Oh my God, you got to Google exploded axon. It's a thing. So like architects will draw the building all on one, level, the whole building, and then for specificity's sake, they put one level on each diagram. And then let's say they're looking at the kitchen sink, they'll explode out the kitchen sink into parts. And so, it's like with astrologer, like
Uh,
mechanics will make an exploded diagram of like a transmission and you'll see all the pieces. And so an exploded astro chart would be like maybe like one wheel would have your moon square Pluto, and then one wheel would have your Venus, Mars, South Node, and then each aspect. It's like chords in a song. They used to call the chart the Song of Life, and a song has what, like five or six chords in it, and so it would be like putting one chord on each wheel, essentially.
Interesting. I
Yeah.
like that. I'll have to play with that idea.
Well, and actually, I've been looking for an app to do that for years. People are always talking about building an astrological remediation app, and that would be one of the features that I would put in there. Because in the Kepler College lecture I did on remediation, I talked about the exploded axon actually. And then people always approach me of like, we should make an app of that. And I was like, yeah, I don't like you enough to make an app with you. No, I don't really think that. Well, maybe I think that, but I don't say that out loud on camera. But it's a lot to commit to making an app with somebody is what I'm trying to say.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
But you and I are, friends, so maybe you could explode the diagram in your app, and then I could tell every single person I ever meet in a lecture about your app.
Oh, that's a good idea. I'll be working on it. Be working on it. If I have some time tonight, I'll probably start working on it tonight.
Yeah.
Mm. So
So,
the moon, yeah. So before we started, I said I had something controversial to share about the moon. And this is only just based on my experiences. A lot of times when I read books or I talk to someone, even students, and sometimes I'll be talking to a student and I'll ask about the moon and they'll start talking about the emotions. And I'll stop them and I'll say, like, you've never heard me say that before. Like, where are you getting that information? So what I'm saying is, to me, and I'm not saying the moon has nothing to do with emotions, but I'm saying the moon is not the planet of emotions.
what, Ricky?
Yes. Yes.
Stop
Yes.
pushing the buttons of every astrologer listening.
I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. Again, I'm not saying they have nothing to do with each other, but if I'm thinking of emotions, the planet that comes to my mind first is Venus.
Really? What? Well, Venus is a certain kind of emotions. It's like love emotions.
Well, that's what we're taught, right? And that's the aim. But how many times have people been aiming for love emotions and got exactly the opposite?
I don't
Right? How can you separate them, right? If you say I love you, but right, if you how much of the time how much of the time do you act like it? So
Well,
right, so the
depends on the chart I'm dealing with, but yeah.
exactly. So the way I enter this is through the word affections. Because if you talk to most people about affections, they're going to say, astrologers are going to say Venus, Venus, Venus. And if we look a little bit closer at where the word affection comes from, it comes from the root word affect.
Hmm.
Right? And if you look at any psychology book, if you look for the what does affect mean, right? It means emotion. So if we think of music, art, beauty, love, what all these things have in common is they move us emotionally, right? And if we can say art, there's some art that moves us to tears. Right? We could call that love, but right, it's it's kind of wieldy. But if you think of emotion, that's the point of art, right? That's the point of love, right? Is to move the emotions. Even so, and now back to the moon. Okay. And again, I'm not saying the
I'm
moon.
gonna argue with you a little today. This is
Oh,
gonna be
good.
fun.
Perfect. Perfect. All right, let me make my case for the moon. All right. So if I'm talking about the moon, I'm not going to say emotions. The first word is going to be something about taking care, nurturing, tending to.
Which is driven by emotions. I mean, we tend to the things about that we care for.
Oh, I'm not. Yes, I'm not arguing. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that the moon is not related to emotions, but if when we really think about how emotions affect us in life, it's typically through relationships, right? It's typically through Venus type stuff, where the moon, yes, right? Because in order to do a good job of tending to something, right, you do have to feel something. But the word I like to use for the moon is it's our impressionability, how
Hmm.
impressionable we are. And the example I use is I was looking outside the other day and it was drizzling, and I couldn't tell from looking at the trees if there was any drizzle. But to the other side of the property, we have a pond. And so I walked to the other window and I looked at the pond, and it was obvious by looking at the pond that it was drizzling because the nature of the water, it's more impressionable than the nature of the grass and the trees.
Interesting.
And so it's the part of us, right? I think of the image of nurturing of a baby, right? A baby can't talk, right? A baby just can cry and show you if they're uncomfortable or not. But our ability to be impressed, right? Our ability and our motivation to be impressed by what the baby is feeling is what motivates us and puts us into action to do something to tend to or to take care of the child. Yes, emotions are necessary, but I don't even think that they're cultivated in that context, right? If we think of the cultivation of emotions is through being around things and people that we like,
Hmm.
right? If I like someone, right, I'm going to make more effort, right, to appreciate what they're saying and to feel good about the person. If I don't like someone, I'm not going to make very much effort to feel any differently about the person.
Hmm. Well, okay, so I have to speak this a little bit. So from an ancient astrology perspective, you know the concept of sect, right? Like nocturnal and diurnal sect, which I've controversially reclassified as classification. Like if you look at the Greek word it for sect, it's actually class. A philosophical sect is where they got that word. But it's like the night class of planets and the day class of planets. Okay, that makes some sense. Okay, well, they said that the sun, Jupiter, and Saturn work together in the day class to grow us. Jupiter grow like the sun is your vital force, it's your outer identity, your work-oriented identity, and Jupiter grows us, in our work identity, and then Saturn constricts us with boundaries and stuff. And then in the night class of planets, the moon is ruling the night sect, and Venus and Mars are the growth and kind of boundary, so it's like when we are intimate with somebody, or we with Venus emotions, we grow closer to something. We say like, you know like I want to be closer and talk to you. And then if we have transits from Mars, we're like, get away from me, and we push kids push food away on when Mars hits their moon, and when Venus hits their moon they take the sweets in and they eat it. Like, so I think the moon, Venus, and Mars are said to kind of work together on that emotional growth, the growth of the emotional sphere. What do you think of that?
Oh, I think that's beautiful. I think that that makes so much sense to me. And when I'm speaking more in terms of the practical use of saying that a planet is associated with the emotions. Because maybe I'm just missing something when I'm talking to someone about the moon and they start talking about emotions. It's like we lose the whole, like, nothing we say after that becomes significant. But if I say, it's important for you to take care of yourself. And the way you know how to take care of yourself is being sensitive to the things that feel good and the things that don't feel good to you, the things that nourish you and the things that don't nourish you,
Hmm.
right? Then, we can have that conversation. And if we do start talking about the emotions or the feelings and all that good stuff, then to me, 100% of the time, right? It's so much easier to use Venus to get a handle on that idea.
That's interesting. You know what I like about you? Okay, so I don't mean to detract from the episode a little bit, but I have to talk to you about something production wise. Okay.
Please.
So our team of producers is just like super popping right now. And we keep talking about the WWF Wrestling Federation with, my favorite, probably my favorite producer of all time is Vincent McMahon, who did the WWF. So do you know about baby faces and heels in wrestling?
I don't.
Okay, so heels are the villains or the bad guys, and the baby faces are the good guys, right? So it's like, Hulk Hogan was a baby face. Everyone loved Hulk Hogan. He's like all American hero. And then all of a sudden he went heel and he would start painting his beard black and stuff. It was when he went over the NWA, this group of anyway. But the point is that and when a wrestler switches, it's called a face turn. So when you go from good guy to bad guy, and so I keep thinking about you, and I'm like, as a producer, I'm like, are you a good guy or a bad guy? I was like, wait a second, you were like a heel in football because you started smoking all this weed, which is like a villainous thing to do as a football player, or like and you got kicked out and like all this stuff, and I'm like, wait, you're kind of a bad boy. But then you're like a heart of like your heart's all pure and like you're full of the Holy Spirit. And I'm like, wait, you're one of those because your Aries imprint is kind of a bad boy. And but then the rest of you is like so good and pure and like so I feel like you're kind of like that in astrology. You're like, you come on and you're always like pushing my buttons a little bit. And I'm just like, are you a bad boy? Are you a villain? So as astrologer, are you a good guy or a bad guy? What's the deal?
I think I'm first a bad guy, and then
Okay,
I become a good, you know.
interesting.
But at first, because I think I do need to be a bad guy, because I feel like the first thing with most people I meet having astrological conversations, I feel like I need to kill part of their education, to the bad guy to build it back up. So I got to
It's a
pop
good
some.
t-shirt. Kill your education
Yeah,
with an
exactly.
X. With an X.
Yeah, I think
Ugh.
I'm that's what I'm here to do is destroy people's education.
But okay, that's so South Node bad boy of you because I feel like you're a South Node villain and then you turn into like a North Node angel where it's like you're like I come in like breaking shit down and like the first thing you did to me when we started our episodes together, you broke it down. You're like, I'm not doing this science, we're doing this planets, and I was like, oh really? Is that what we're doing? And it's like I don't fight with you too much, but I could. I mean, if I disagreed, but I actually agree with what you're doing because I'm actually like a counterculture guerrilla warrior, as far as mental ideas go. It's like what guerrillas do, Geurilla, guerrillas, is they fight, they actually bombard people until they're forced to find peace. Like I feel like you're kind of a guerrilla. Like you're coming in, you're saying like bam, 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 like, and then people have to like think about it differently, and then they kind of find peace in their education after you've kind of like shifted their, like, you know what I mean? You're like
Yeah.
uprooting them so they can think
Well,
well.
yeah, I think you have to have that. You have to experience that pain of the way we've invested so much of our mind energy into framing the world. We all have to experience that pain of when that tower falls, you know. But the
Interesting.
joy is when you get to build it back up, but it's like it's more accurate, right?
But
It's bricks that you get to choose.
so do you think it's important? So why do you think it's important to kill people's education in order to make good astrologers?
Because because I think the modern person has outgrown the astrological education.
So you're like moving things forward beyond what's been done, and you're saying this is all the rudiments that have been written about, and let's move forward further. Like, what about this? What about this? What about this kind of thing?
I mean, there's so much that has been written, and I think if people were more apt to go to older, more original texts, they'd find more gold there. But so much of what is out there is it's like layers. It's like the teacher, students, person left notes and someone else got them and then they wrote notes and then passed it on. And so it's so watered down in pop culture. And whether that's the psychological astrologers or the evolutionary, whatever the popular thing is, and in that field, the true to me, the true astrologos is what is watered down, where people trust someone else's opinion about something that they have the same eyes and mind to observe themselves. And that's the thing that gets me when people go to what someone said as opposed to what they're actually seeing in the chart and in someone's life.
Hmm.
It's like you
So,
don't learn astrology from a book, right? You learn the outline, but you learn it from actually seeing how what you read in the book actually manifests in someone's life.
interesting. So now I feel like I get you right now. It's like you're always poking me and the viewers a little bit for the good of all concerned, where you're saying, I'm gonna like poke this idea that the moon is emotions. And the reason I'm gonna do that is I want to get Andy thinking so that she can go outside the box, she can go farther. And like, because you're always like teaching me a thing, and I'm like, an old dog with all the tricks. No, I'm just kidding. But
But you can go there, right? And you go there so easily and willingly and graciously, where most people, it's like they have all these reasons why they aren't willing to just open their mind and entertain a different idea for a couple of minutes.
well, you know what? Philosophy is a didactic discipline, which is it's supposed to be learned through argument. Like in philosophy, like, we should go to a philosophy conference sometime because apparently what they do is they'll present a paper, right? And then everyone argues with the paper, and then they feel like they got somewhere. And a lot of people think that we should just listen to our teachers and then just sit there and agree. And astrologers are philosophers, right? Like we're technical philosophers. So it's like you like I feel like I maybe have been trained in the art of didactics where it's like when you present something I'm like, oh well, what about this, what about this sectary, and what, and so it's like, and in doing that we're like dancing basically, but neither of us take, I'm kind of a bad boy too. I mean, it's a long story. I mean, you know my history, but some, not everyone does. But like you talk about villains, like when I was an upstart and came out and translating the whole Vidius Valens anthology, like I got in a lot of trouble for that actually, because I was like, these guys couldn't figure it out, they couldn't get back past book 8, and then I was all like, oh bam, and I like came running and took 15 years. They're like, that girl's crazy, that girl's crazy, and then I was just like, bam. But the point is like I did that for the good of the field, right? Like I didn't do that for the good of my own persona, you know. um anyway, I just feel like didactics is an argumentative art form, and good
Yeah.
professors are
Yeah, I
what.
mean that's I feel like I want to train my students so that when I say something, they have the ability to argue back for more than two times back and forth. Then we can really unpack something because I don't fool myself into thinking I know everything. I know something, but I know the more I can communicate with someone, it's going to unpack and unfold and allow me to perceive even more.
That's actually a super good point, is like we should be teaching our students to argue basically. Like I never thought of it that way, but like because I think that's how you know if someone's kind of more of a student or more of a professor in astrology, or a figurehead, is like, do they go at you, or are they just like, okay, okay,
Yeah.
like, oh, kind of thing.
But
Sorry.
That's okay. I have a Gemini sun and a Virgo rising, so like I can understand why it's difficult for my students to argue with me because I am very technical in my arguments. And in order to argue with me, you have to meet that technical bar. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. But I like it that way because it pushes them to be more thoughtful about the way what they see and what comes out of their mouth relative to what they see.
Well, it's like music, right? Like anyone could just down at the piano and play anything, right? But when you learn the scales and the rudiments and the technical theory, then you can sit down with another jazz improv person and really be like, okay, like you're gonna improv now, I'm gonna improv. And so I think there is something to be said of like you do have to learn the rudiments of astrology, and then you can start in this didactic, and plus, leaders in astrology are kind of like tribal elders, and so it's like there is a pecking order that occur, like and it's like a tribe, it's like you can't just like, if you just started astrology you can't be up here because like wisdom grows us in our field, like you, so
Yeah.
okay, I didn't mean to detract from the mood. Okay, so we're talking about moon and not being the sole planet as to kind of you're actually okay. I want to talk about this impressions or impressionism kind of thing.
Yeah,
So you're saying that the moon is more our internal impression of the world than just like emotional responses kind of thing? Is
that's
that what,
exactly what I'm saying. Because the emotional responses come from the impression.
interesting.
Yes.
So let's look at oh go ahead.
Yeah. So if I'm putting this in taking the moon and saying, okay, let's explode this idea. Right, what we can do is we can look at different cultures and we can say what are different rules, taboos, etc., that cultures have around. We can use nurturing children, raising children as an example. And you're going to get a lot of information about the moon culturally.
Okay.
You know? So like right, one way to think of it is if I'm impressionable, right, and I'm around people that make an uncomfortable impression upon me, right, that's information that maybe I don't need to be around these people. If I'm impressionable and there's people that make a positive impression on me, and one example of a positive impression is that you want to take care of someone, right? You care about how they feel because that's the nature of the impression. What is being impressed is how they feel. This is why I attended to nurturing is I can't take care of myself if I don't know how I feel. Right. So I'm a Cancer moon. My wife is a Capricorn moon, right? And our moons oppose each other. And image I have is one day we're going somewhere and I'm in the car waiting for her and she gets in the car and she kind of slams the door, right? This is the moon, okay? She kind of slams the door, all right? Because I'm not even looking at her, right? I'm getting ready to go, and she gets in, and the car slams a little bit harder than it should. Okay. The moon feels that, right? Impressionability. Okay. The moon feels that. Okay. Right. And if I go back into my childhood stuff, okay, my mom is mad because I must have, okay. But all of that is from the impression of I can tell that my wife is upset about something. Okay. And because I understand, I know myself a little bit more, I don't say what's wrong. That doesn't work. I say, what's up? Right? What's up? And she looks at me and she says, in a very terse kind of way, nothing, you know? And then I say, are you sure? Because I feel like you just slammed the door harder than than you usually do, you know? And then she like paused for a minute, right? And then she was able to connect to the fact that something inside frustrated her and she was still holding on to it, right? And as a Capricorn moon, if I wouldn't have said anything, there's a good chance, right? That mood would have stuck throughout the day and built until something else, right? Something else brought it to her attention. But the fact that my impressionability, okay, we might call it sensitivity. Why are you being so sensitive? But my impressionability, right, allowed me to reflect back to her how she was feeling, right? And from that, connect to her moon so that she could be aware of how she was feeling. And one of the key words that I attached to the moon, adaptability, right? So it's this two thing where there's impressionability that leads to adaptability, right? The
I'm
parent
listening.
is aware of what the child needs and what the child wants and how the child feels, and a good parent, right, does whatever it takes to help the child feel better. So the nurturing part is directly connected to the impressionability part.
Interesting. You're making me think of like how certain moon signs are more impressionable than others, right? Like water
Yes,
moons are more like Pisces moon is just like impressionable to every vibe that ever was
yes,
sent out anywhere.
exactly.
But then an Aries moon is like they're not super impressionable. They're kind of like making an impression constantly. I have to look up impression here. This is
If you think of the Aries moon is impressed, okay, by strife.
uh-huh. Oh, interesting.
So it
Oh,
is
wow. So
more
it's like what
impressionist.
impresses you?
Yes, exactly. What makes an impression? What most easily, naturally makes an impression upon you?
Okay. Do you want to talk about the definition of impression from the dictionary?
Please.
Okay. A strong effect produced on the intellect, feelings, or conscience. So That's actually really interesting. Like, I don't know if you've ever studied about how the glyphs are drawn, so like the Mercury glyph is the whole circle of the sun over the cross of matter, and then the moon is on the
I
top
have.
and it's supposed to be in the mind, actually.
I have. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Mhm.
So
So,
that's
yeah.
so the mind in Vedic astrology, like the moon is actually mental. It's not emotional. It's that kind of goes with your impression idea of like,
In
'cause-
the astrology that I practice, the moon is the planet of the mentality. And the way we distinguish it from Mercury is to use common language, we would say the moon is the unconscious mind and Mercury is the conscious mind. And when I say unconscious mind, I mean it in the psychological sense of the fact that the conscious mind is a part of the unconscious mind. The Mercury, the conscious mind, is the part of the moon, the unconscious mind that we make conscious, that becomes part of our objective consciousness. So one way to think about it, and I get this from studying yoga and Vedic astrology, is that the moon is like where we hold all the memories, where they're all stored.
okay.
Okay. Right. And Mercury is our ability to go retrieve those impressions and bring them out, right? Make them conscious. Because there's right so many things you know it, right? But you're looking for the words. The Mercury's trying to find it in the dark and it can't find it, and you're like, oh, it'll come to me later, right? And then when the mood changes, okay, or the moon changes, right? The light moves slightly, right, and the idea comes to us.
Hmm.
Right. So this whole idea of everything that comes to us to get inside of us has to be filtered through the moon. And impressionability, some things, right, make it through that sieve, through that filter, and some things don't. Right. This is where I can think of the moon as being related to the stomach. Okay. Right. And I'd like digesting stuff, taking things in, right? Certain things, right, we know are good for us to take in, and certain things we're like, no, thank you, right? No, thank you. I don't want that right now, right?
Yeah.
I don't feel what I say. I don't feel like that right now.
Huh. This is so interesting. So it's like the first and immediate effect upon the mind in an outward or inward perception, it's a sensation. So would you give the moon to sensation?
100%. If we realize like all of the things that you just described are part of what registers as a sensation.
Interesting. So each moon sign has a different sensation, right? Like a Cancer moon. Okay, okay. Now I want to test you. I'm like, okay, what's your impression of this? I'm like, what's your impression of my crocheted sloth? No, I'm like, I don't know. It's like,
Yeah, but I think for a Cancer moon, the sensation is going to be more of a water sensation. Again, right? My wife closes the door, and what impressed me was the emotional content of her closing the door. You know,
interesting.
a Gemini moon is going to be more perceptive to words. Oh, what do you mean by that? Oh, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Right? They're going to pick
Wow.
up on nuance in the words that someone used or the way the person puts the words together.
Yeah, totally. Interesting. I'm gonna be thinking about this later when I'm just chilling and with my boyfriend even. Okay, wait, okay, so the effect produced by an agency or influence, a notion, remembrance, or belief, often one that is vague or indistinct. Okay, would you say that the moon's okay, well, I want to add in the term reflection because the moon is a reflected light of the sun. And so it's like, could we
But
say
the reflection is the impression. We're saying the same thing.
okay. Okay. So, I would say we have an impression and then we maybe reflect upon that impression.
What I'm saying, you can say it that way, but I'm saying the reflection is the impression, right? Because right, we can't say that what we perceived is actually what was out there. We don't know. All we know is the impression it made upon us. And we
Yeah.
try to figure it out, and we've tried to figure it out from there. And I think, but part of, right, I think then the drop first hits the water, right? It's the impression, and maybe the reflection are the ripples. Because after something, right, it hits us on the surface, depending on the how fast it was going, right? How deeply does it touch us? Depends on how big those ripples are, how big the reflection is, and then how big the reaction is.
Yeah. This is making, I have this real life situation. So my main producer right now is working on a new ride or whatever. And so on our team we have a Capricorn moon and he's like so they'll be sharing cars and stuff and the Capricorn moon's like impressed if it's in the budget and if
Yes.
the engine's good, you know. And my Pisces moon is like sharing pimp my ride's most outrageous additions and I was like I'd be impressed if you pimped your ride and maybe wore some oils in there and made it smell good. Like all my Pisces moon wants is an arty car. Like I don't care if the
Yeah.
engine's good or like so like I see what you're saying is like we each have this impression of a situation and like not only what would impress us, but like it's what we notice, it's what we care about, it's what we value. I mean, do you think it's
It's what we feed off of, right? Because again,
oh
part of the
that's
moon.
so literal. That's so cool.
Yes, it is. It is part of the moon, right? That's the whole point, right? If we think of what is the value of taking things in or being impressed by things, right? Because it builds our tissues, right? And that's on a physical sense. On an emotional, mental sense, it builds our emotional body and it builds our mental body, right? And it's like, because even the food we take in, the only food that gets digested is the food that our body has the ability to digest. Right. And if we take in so much crap that we don't actually have the ability to take in, we clog up our systems. And this is physically, this is emotionally, and this is mentally. This is why the moon is so important, not about our feelings, but how to take care of ourselves.
Interesting. So now I'm looking at, okay, now I'm looking at this impressionism. What was impressionism as far as art goes? It's a way of painting with informal subject matter and effects of light, noted directly as they impress the artist and developed as a method of expressing luminosity with juxtaposed touches of pure color. Interesting. I feel like I want to study impressionism now. Like it's more impressionism is more feelings based art. It's not like linear. It's not appealing to the maybe it's more I don't know. You know
Yeah,
more
but if
about
you,
art
again, I
than
go
me.
back to the water, the drop hitting the water. Okay, right? The drop comes from the heaven, it hits the water, and it makes an impression on the water. It changes the water, right? Based on the qualities of the water.
Hmm.
So, right, how we are each impressed is based on, because we get into the moon sign, right? The quality of our moon sign and the quality of the aspects to the moon.
Hmm. Oh, interesting. This is so interesting. It's like you really did stir the pot today because I'm impressed by this idea that because you're right, feelings are I mean, this is all semantics, right? Like these are all just us deconstructing concepts and saying, is it this? Is it that? We're asking a bunch of questions about the moon. What's an impression? What's that look like? You know, kind of thing. But I do think this one definitely works as far as, let's okay, what impresses a Taurus moon? I guess food and flavors and money, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. So
I just want to go through the moon signs.
but,
Like, what
yeah,
impresses the Libra moon?
so when I think of impression is important, but to go back to the root of this concept of how we got to the concept is the idea of nourishing, taking care, tending to. Is that the deepest purpose of the moon is to tend to something to facilitate its full growth. And
Hmm.
so part of being built inside of the moon is the maturity, right? And if you think of having a newborn baby and how much the newborn baby has to impress you, right? Or it doesn't live, okay?
Hmm.
But as that child gets older and older and more mature, right? That how ideally how much they right they impress upon you becomes less and less and less until they don't need you anymore.
Hmm.
Okay. Because again, part of the impression is to touch something in us that springs us into action to do something to take care of something.
Interesting. This,
I
well,
think it's
it's
like
like, okay, like if you impress your dad, like he might, get you that new whatever you've been wanting, which would help your development,
100%, 100%.
right?
My son, okay? My son, he studies astrology, he knows I'm a Cancer moon. So if he asks me for something and I say no, he knows exactly how to change his behavior to get it to change his behavior to get me to a yes.
Oh,
And I tell people, right, is I can be hard and I can be tough, but if you show vulnerability, I can't help but turn into a caretaker. Anyone in any situation shows vulnerability, it naturally impresses me and it changes my response.
man, I should be showing you more vulnerability. Sorry, I'm such a boss. No, I'm just kidding.
But that's a form of, especially for a woman, that's a huge form of vulnerability. Huge.
Why? Because I need a bodyguard? No, I'm just kidding. No, I just like to mess with you sometimes. Come on. It's like, what if I was boring? Wouldn't that be the worst offense? Come on.
We wouldn't be here if you were bored.
Oh, you savage.
Well, I'm a Gemini,
Oh,
right? And
that's
if I was bored, everyone would know, and it would not be interesting, and wouldn't be good for anyone.
well, I love okay, so I love this exercise of like what impresses a Scorpio moon. It would be like loyalty, commitment, you know, um, like this is actually such a cool and positive take on the moon because people would take a negativistic approach and say like Scorpio moons are jealous and possessive, and you're like, well, what impresses them is loyalty and like commitment
Well,
or
what impresses them is people's wounds, you know? And I think this is why the moon is considered debilitated in Scorpio, because to me, debilitation just means it requires more effort. So for nurturing, so what I'm saying is the moon in Scorpio, in order for someone to truly be nurtured, is going to require more effort. Because
interesting.
like the opposite Taurus, right? If you're trying to nurture someone with a candy bar, right, that's easy. Right?
Oh my God. Did you say Tauruses were simple?
They are. And I mean that in like the most beautiful way,
Yeah.
right? But in order to nourish a Scorpio, you have to go down and find your wound and share it with them. Oh, right. That's that's what they
Look
eat.
at my Scorpio mug. Here.
Yeah, perfect. So again, it's a beautiful but typically things that require more effort that we accomplish, they're more rewarding, right? They're
Interesting.
more rewarding, right? Again, a candy bar. Having a bad day. I need to just feel better. A candy bar will do it, right? But I'm
What
in the midst.
impresses the Sag moon?
Mm, I think I had this painting I bought, and it was a blue dog. This blue dog who was pictured on a motorcycle and like in wide open air, you know? And I don't want to use the word freedom, but I do like this image of an open road, you know, of an open road. And I think that kind of openness, right, room to expand is what impresses, nourishes, nurtures, because that's the whole point of the impression is that it's giving me something that I need. It's giving
Yeah.
me something that I need.
So okay, so Sag moon story. My daughter's a triple Sag, and she actually has six planets in Sag in the first house. But she likes to drive me around, obviously, because Sagittarius love their cars. And I thought I was gonna impress her when I got her some map books, because I thought, what if her GPS goes down? What if she wants to? And she wasn't initially impressed by it. She was just like, you Luddite freak or whatever. Like, she just thought like, why is my mom like buying me this old thing? But today, months later, she's like, I really love my map books because like, this and that and this and that. And I was like, I truly impressed her Sag Moon with these map books. This wisdom she didn't even know she needed. It was like, what if your GPS goes down? But yeah, I think yeah, impressing Sages is so fun. I think an adventure impresses them is what.
100%. Yes, 100%. That's what I mean when the open road, because the adventures, I have no idea. I have no idea what's gonna happen, but I got enough money to get somewhere. I got
Yeah.
enough money, right, and somewhat of a map to know that I'm headed somewhat in the right direction, but I'm
Yeah. Well, okay, should we do the last one we haven't touched on, which is Aquarius? I know we're supposed to be doing cultural considerations, but we can do that. But what about Moon and Aquarius?
so I have two daughters, and they both have the moon in Aquarius. So I I know this one. Space. Space.
Like distance and not hoarding, like not hovering, basically.
Exactly. Space. Right,
Oh,
space.
interesting.
Because it's like the story. I tell this weird story. I don't know where it comes from. I tell this weird story when I'm trying to talk about an Aquarius moon. All right. Tell a story about being in the third grade and we get news that there's going to be a teacher that's going to space, the Challenger.
Uh,
Okay. All right. And we're sitting in class and it's announced the teacher's going to space and everyone gets excited. But one kid in the class is thinking, teachers aren't supposed to go to space, you know? It's third grade, right? The kid kind of feels some way around about it, you know, right? Not as excited as all the other kids who are supposed to be excited, right? Fast forward, we're all, and I remember third grade, we're all sitting in the class watching television, right? And the Challenger takes off, and there's a big explosion, okay? And everyone in the class, depressed, crying, head is down, except for the one kid, right? And not that the kid is happy, but the kid is like, I knew there was something going on here. Okay. Right. And then, right, one of the kids might look and they say, why aren't you crying? Okay. And what does the kid do? Right. He pretends. He, he pretends that he's more sad than he actually is.
mm,
Right. And he loses the awareness of I was on to something to, oh, I have to feel like everyone else feels.
mm,
So
interesting.
I'm saying a situation like that makes it really hard for an Aquarius moon later in life to get to be impressed by those things because they've learned that being impressed by those things, right? Other people don't get it.
Mm,
And so, but the conventional like nourishment from the people around, okay, typically doesn't feel as good or is not worth it to an Aquarius moon.
mm,
So a simple suggestion of giving them the space, meaning not putting our expectations on them of how they're supposed to feel, but truly being curious about what do you feel? Because, right, someone who's learned to tune into that Aquarius moon, the things that they're impressed upon, if they allow them to register, right, it's good for us to have that awareness, right? To know when the emperor is wearing no clothes, okay?
mm.
And I think healthy Aquarius moons can sense it. They're impressed by it, right? The teacher says something and the kid's like, I don't know about that, right? All the other kids nodding their head. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Yeah, I would just add to that. I think Aquarius moons are impressed by groups. Like they love being in on a team or, they're impressed by a lot of ideas and stimulation all at once, you know?
But this is part of what I'm saying becomes the issue for the Aquarian moon. Because if we're impressed by groups, especially at a young age, right, we tend to be more sensitive to groupthink,
Mm,
right? And if the nature of the groupthink doesn't give us the space or the freedom to find our place in the group, then it can that sensitivity or that impressionability to the group can backfire because we can be ultimately aware of where we differ from the group and how to navigate that.
yeah, interesting. Interesting. Okay, well, we have 10 minutes. Let's talk about the moon along race and cultural lines. So, I know you have a lot of thoughts. Anything you'd been thinking about before we got on about how like the moon expresses in um, white culture versus African American culture or anything like that?
Yeah. So, and I don't take this literally, but I do use this a lot in my practice. And the idea that in a man's chart, you can get a lot of information about the women in a man's life by looking at the man's moon.
Okay.
And so in the context of this conversation, I use that and I say it applies more to white Americans than it does to Black Americans.
Okay.
Right. And another example of this is you go to a party, the expectation is that the white guy can't dance and that the black guy can dance. Okay. And so, right, mood,
100%.
right, in the right way. And again, impressionability. Okay. It almost feels like when the white guy is dancing that they can't hear the music.
Oh, dude, I'm just
I'm
not
making fun,
denying
right?
it at
But
all.
stereotypes, okay, stereotypes.
Yeah.
But this idea, right, that it's difficult for the music to impress upon them,
Oh,
you know,
interesting.
right?
Interesting.
And someone who's got rhythm, who's got soul, right? It's almost like you can hear the music through their body because the impression is so pure.
Interesting. Well, I've actually noticed that with different charts. Like, people with earth moons and or just earthy charts, the music will play and they just sit there. And then the water moons are just like bopping. They like can't not
Yeah,
be
yeah,
impressed by the music. That is so real.
yes,
Yes.
yes, right. So the moon very much connected to music,
Well,
rhythm.
don't people give the moon to the masses? Like we could talk about
Yeah,
mass impressions. Like what impresses, like you were saying in your culture, people weren't impressed with your brains. They were impressed with your brawn and like your ability to run. Like, right? Do you feel like there's like a cultural impression that occurs? Is that the moon?
yeah. Well, when I think of the moon to me is the planet of popularity. Popularity. I don't know if we talked about this, but this idea of someone is a household name, household, right? This idea of, right,
Oh,
whatever the
like
person
that's so
has
moon, yeah.
impressed us so much that we are talking about them at the dinner table,
Fascinating. That
right?
is a good one. Good one.
Yeah. Well, because just studying charts, like Franklin Delano Roosevelt, okay, he's got the Cancer moon in the 10th house, okay, fireside chats, and I watched a documentary on him, and his whole story was he got polio, he purchased a retreat down in Georgia where he spent a lot of time around the common people. So when I think of the moon, I think of more of the common people, where you think of he's around them and they could tell, even though this guy is a big shot politician, he cares about us. And because he truly cared when he was around them, he was impressed upon by what was going on in their lives. And so he asked, how does this feel? How does this? And he started to have a connection to the common people. And if you really look at his track record, this idea of that the government is supposed to take care of the people, right? That's very much a moon concept. And it comes from him. It comes from the New Deal. So and it literally was, right? He sat, and if you watch these, he's sitting in front of a fireside, right? The fireplace, and his mom is sitting there looking at him like a doting mom, and his wife is sitting there crocheting while he's talking to the country. Oh,
Wow.
man, right? And how can you not feel connected, not feel like this person cares about me, not be impressed upon by what he was saying, and to
Wow.
really feel it, to feel what he's saying, not just hear it?
Yeah, yeah. That's fascinating. Like how to make an impression on the public. I never thought about that because I would never really rocked how the moon could be the public and then it could also be your personal feelings. And I see what you're saying though, where it's like, what impression do we make on the public to either make us popular or not popular or be loved or love and feel, feel that, you know, God, so do you think? Well, I guess a moon in the 10th house person manicures an impression for the public.
Well, I would say because it goes both ways, right? Is whatever is going on publicly has a greater impression upon someone who has the moon in the 10th house. Right?
Mm.
Even when I was a kid, my mom would say, "Why do you care so much about what's going on in the world than you do about your own family?"
Well, you have the moon in the 11th house, right?
Well, in your system, it's in the 11th. In
Okay.
plastic, it's in the 10th.
Well,
Yes.
and I think the 11th is pretty public too. Like even if either of those.
It rules my 11th house, cuz, so I can get to the 11th house.
Hmm.
I can get to the 11th house easily.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Okay, yeah, so I can see that. Yeah, people who have moon in 10 seem to feel the public, they feel their crowd, they feel their crew, they feel their posse. Like it's real. You know what I mean?
So they're in it, right? Because they can feel that, they're in a position to do something about it, right? To nurture, to tend to the collective.
Huh, interesting. Well, it makes me think of hypnosis and how hypnosis has an impression on you, right? Like like it gets your subconscious mind. Like you were saying that Mercury is like the mental mind, and then the moon is like this subconscious mind, and like that's where impressions hit us. Like if you get hypnotized,
Yes.
it's back there. That's so. I can't stop tripping on impression. Like this is like I'm not gonna trip on this for days, but like, yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. So white people would have a different impression of the same chart then like different cultures would have different impressions of the same
And but
chart.
gender comes in too, because if we think about, at least on the surface, like what's the area of life where this energy is most welcome, and it's in rearing children. right? And it's in taking care of the guy, right? It's typically rooted in most cultures in the feminine. But this is why it gets complicated in African American culture because after slavery, the women were the African American women were the ones who had easier time finding work doing domestic things for the white people. And so it like maintained women in the moon as powerful, but because black men really didn't have the ability to manifest as the sun, because of the laws and everything, that it gave our culture a greater appreciation for the moon, right? A soul man, a soul brother, more feminine, right? Who can dance, can move to the music, is better able to respond to things, might be lazy. They only do what they feel like doing, right? All this negative dark moon stuff typically gets projected, at least in our culture, gets projected onto the other race, right? But because of the power dynamics, it falls onto the men.
Hmm, interesting. Can you dance?
I can dance. Yeah.
Yeah, I can dance.
Yeah. Well, I can feel the music,
Well,
It's
I'm a
like I don't
Pisces moon. Like I am
100%.
made of music. Are you kidding? Like,
But even like a white man with a strong moon, okay, right? It's gonna be harder for him to acknowledge and admit that he can dance and that he's more impressionable. Because
interesting.
part of be like the image of being a man, right, is that you're not, right?
Yeah.
It's more of this solar kind of image of I radiated, people have to deal with
Yeah.
it.
Well, so and I would think that in order for me to impress like two men of the same chart, let's say let's say we had an astro twin of yours and they were white or whatever. It's like what I would do to impress you might be a little bit different than what I would do to impress him because of the cultural lineage you guys are coming from. Like they're
Yes, yes. So an example of this is sometimes you'll see in a man's chart with a white man with the strong moon, the moon comes out as him being a provider, right? It's like if I'm talking to someone and they have a good job and where most men would brag about their position, this guy, he only talks about how it gives them the opportunity to take care of his family and they get to go on vacations and they get to do all of these things and that's what motivates him to do the job. That's a moon motivation. It's a
interesting.
moon motivation. As opposed to someone says, yes, I have all this power in this position and I can do this and I can do that and I can do this, right? That's more of a sun position.
Hmm. Interesting.
Or even those managers or bosses that really like to take care of their people, how are you? Because a strong moon can't help but be impressed by the people around them and how they're feeling, right? And
Yeah.
either they have to numb themselves or shut themselves off, or they have to do something to help everyone feel better. Like I think of sometimes when you're on a plane and there's that baby in the back, right? And the parent can't figure out how to get the baby to calm down. Okay. All the moon people, right? The whole flight, they're like, shut that baby up, right? Because they're feeling what the baby is feeling, right?
Hmm.
And they're feeling the incompetence of the parent, right?
Yeah. Well, hey, I know we're at time, but do you want to talk about the nodes next time?
Yeah, because the nodes of the moon, I'd love to talk about the
Right,
nodes.
and I think we've gone through all the planets, and we'll have to like write what we're going to talk about after the planets. I do have my critical race theory book, and like there's all kinds of things we can draw on, but I do think the nodes we would be remiss to not talk about the nodes.
Well, I think in the context of what we've been discussing, the way that I view the nodes is they're probably the most significant thing to talk about.
Yeah,
Because
and I
the way
think
I view the nodes is pointing to the symbol in astrology that most closely points to our DNA, which is directly connected to race.
oh, interesting. Yeah, and I know Stephen Forrest is one of your teachers, and he's a node guy.
Yeah, of
So I can't wait to learn from you on the nodes and argue with you, of course.
course.
All right. Well, Ricky, it's a just a blessing and an honor to be with you.
Talking about the moon, my favorite thing.
All right. I'll see you soon.
All right.
All right. Bye.